In the previous videos, in part 1 and 2, we have shown you the empty Phoenix after stranding and the logistics that had to be put in place in order to refloat it as soon as possible. Pollution was a real danger. The ship was also sitting on a rock bed, and delaying it would cause the ship to suffer damage to the hull. The ship was also stranded in an upper market residential suburb, and the residents were overly concerned that this may become a permanent feature on this lovely, otherwise tranquil beach. It played off in the quiet upmarket suburb of Sheffield Beach in the town of Ballito in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. The geographical position is shown under the video, and if you copy and paste it into Google Earth Pro, it will take you there. We also talked about the optimum conditions that were required for a successful refloating. The tide would be at optimum spring tide at 4:30 on the 31st of July. So everything was set to attempt a refloating of the empty Phoenix tanker. That day was also a Sunday. The stranding was reported quite wide in the media, and people were curious, and many made it an opportunity to come out of the house. The weather was also quite pleasant and warm. So from early on, people were literally streaming into the otherwise quiet residential suburb. The motor cars literally filled up the suburb, and as access to the road was restricted, most people had to walk almost 2 kilometers to get to the stranded tanker. But it was no deterrent, and there was almost a festive atmosphere in the air. Tanker trucks were parked at about the same distance as most of the cars and were called in on demand. The pumping of fuel and oil continued, although full plans were in place to refloat the empty Phoenix on this day. Somebody told me later that if the ship were to be scuttled in deep enough water, that any oil would almost become solid with the pressure and low temperature and would be very unlikely to leak. But first prize was always to get everything out before a refloating could take place. The risk of local coastal pollution was higher and would have a greater impact, and an early refloating would take care of that situation. From an air support point of view, the Starlight Aviation Group was now apparently fully in control of the operation. More efforts were made to lift equipment to the deck before a refloating would take place. It was not immediately clear what the plan at that time would have been, but it would make sense that the pump may have been on board to pump air into the hull for buoyance. How things would progress after refloating was also not clear to me. As an outsider, I was not part of the press room and had to find out afterwards what the case was by reading the published reports. Early on, a monitoring team from the KwaZulu-Natal Coastal Management was on the beach to ensure that we were not looking at an environmental threat. The pumping of oil and fuel progressed quite clearly, and there was no sign of spillage on the beach. The salvage tug, the Smith & Mandla, was the main component of this operation, and it had an amazing track record. The Smith & Mandla, with main power of 14,317 kilowatts, was the only tugboat used in this day's operation. When the tugboat Smith & Mandla was originally built together with its sister Volraad Woltemade in the Durban harbour in 1976, it was the largest, most powerful salvage tugboat in the world. It then carried the name John Ross. But now it changed companies and was renamed to Smith & Mandla. Later it became part of the Cape Town company SA Mandla as part of the rollout of the government's Operation Pakisa. It was in position from early on, and the pulling cable was attached to the anchor chain. Somebody told me that there was a guillotine installed over the cable on the tugboat itself, and if there was a chance that the ship may pull the tug to the depths, that the guillotine would cut the cable immediately to save the day. Further up in the suburb, the traffic was hardly manageable, and residents had a hard time leaving their houses. So at about 4:30 p.m. on the 31st of July 2011, I positioned myself mainly on the beach road on the hillside above the ship. I had the camera on a tripod, the wind was blowing a bit, and I prepared myself for the event. Most non-essential personnel were removed from the ship in the afternoon, and the cable was now pulled tight in anticipation of beneficial results. But there was a skeleton salvage crew on board, and of course they may have had to be airlifted in case of a refloating. As you may have noticed from the previous video, the ship was lying on solid rock, and there was no sand to assist in this process. At low tide, this was obvious. When the ship stranded, it came in with its stern side first, the backside, and when it struck the rock, it swiveled around until its bow pointing beachward. It was thus more firmly stuck at the stern. The idea was now to swivel it around again by pulling on the bow, and then when that has occurred, there may be some leverage available from the deeper water to get the stern off the rocks. The swell was good, but probably not good enough for the day, and the ship didn't dislodge during this maneuver. The operation was eventually abandoned. When Captain Nigel Campbell, Deputy Chief Operations Officer at the South African Marine Safety Authority, SAMSA, released his statement on the 30th of July, he also stated the following. I quote him, "We have been asked to comment on why, with the Smith Amandla in attendance, did the Phoenix ground, and was this an insurance job? The following facts are now in our possession. The Smith Amandla fired 8 rocket lines to the Phoenix while attempting to reconnect. 6 of these lines have been found on board the Phoenix. 2 messenger lines were then put on board the Phoenix in order to allow them to pull the towing gear on board. The Phoenix reported that on both occasions the messenger rope slipped off the drum end of the winch. Various maritime experts have been consulted, and none of them can recall this happening in previous operations. In these conditions, it is possible that the messenger line would part. The master of the Smith Amandla had to instruct the master of the Phoenix to pay out more anchor cable when the vessel started dragging. A very junior officer knows that this is the first action that is taken when a vessel starts dragging anchor. It would not be the first time that an unscrupulous ship owner was prepared to sacrifice a vessel in an attempt to realize the insured value." As far as the possibility of a stowaway was concerned, he said the following. The Smith Amandla marine salvage crew on board have been suspicious that there is still one person still on board. All the crew were accounted for when they evacuated from the vessel. Last night, a medical kit was left in the accommodation prior to the salvage team being flown ashore. This morning, some of the medication was missing. As the salvage team are totally consumed in removing the fuel from the vessel, the South African Police Services will be requested to search the vessel. It is not unusual for vessels coming from West Africa to have stowaways on board. End of quote. Next time, we will talk about what happened during the second refloating attempt, which was undertaken on the very next day, 1st of August 2011. The spring tide was important, and the salvage team needed to take advantage of that. A choppy sea would add another advantage, as it would work against the hull of the ship. Would it be successful? I strongly suggest that you subscribe to this channel and also confirm the notifications so that you can be informed when the video is released. Thank you for watching. See you next time.